everyone. Welcome back to the This Is Me podcast. I'm Karen.
And I'm Ellie, and today we have Nicki joining us. Nicki is the founder of the Parent Mentor, and we are really looking forward to today's conversation. So, Nicki, thank you so much for joining us. First question, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and sort of how you got to where you are now?
All right, okay. So how long is this podcast going to last? It could be a very long response.
3 weeks.
We can go for however. We've got all day.
All right, okay. Well, as some of you listening to the podcast may or may not know, that Karen and I started back in the mid-'80s as fast-track graduates working for one of Britain's retailers. I spent nearly 30 years working for Asda. Not doing the same job, needless to say. Lots and lots of different jobs, really exciting times. But actually, you get to a point in life and career where you need a bridge out. And the bit that got me out of bed in the morning was concerned with coaching, mentoring. And actually, in the end, that was a job that I think the business didn't want to pay me to do. It was very happy to me to do the job I was doing. But the value add for me was always about coaching and mentoring. So I started to do a master's in coaching and mentoring at Sheffield Business School, which was just amazing, and set up a internal mentoring program at Asda. So that was my kind of test run for the model, really. And I was really interested to know what happens when people come back from maternity leave, because Karen and I both had babies within 2 weeks of each other. And
I was telling Ellie and another podcast guest a few weeks ago about when me and you did the Say You Want to Be a Working Mum.
Oh my goodness!
And we were talking, it was the thresholds of possibility, and it was the dandelion leaf, because this other podcast guest was talking about the dandelion leaf, dandelion leaf, the dandelion flower. And I thought, sometimes I find that little business card and I think,
I know, we had loads of ideas, didn't we?
Yeah, loads of ideas, all the ideas.
I think that's the most exciting thing about when you work for yourself, really. You do, and we talked about this, which was one of our ideas, wasn't it? You know, you stand on the threshold of possibilities. You can do anything. You can't do everything, so you've got to make some choices about what you do. And actually, both for Karen and I, you make choices about what's possible in work and career. And you never think you're going to. You know, when you have, somebody who's pregnant for the first time, in the workplace, they're looking around at everybody else, say, well, that was their experience, but mine's going to be different. And guess what? There's some themes and patterns that emerge time and time again. And actually, what I was interested to know is why people make the choices they do around work and parenting, and also the relationship that an employer has with the individual going off and coming back from maternity leave. And where that point where career intersects with maternity for the first time, and actually what conversations we're having about possibilities. And yeah, that's where mentoring came in, really.
So you went to Sheffield to do and you were still at Asda, yeah?
Yes.
So then what happened? Do tell.
So I was doing a master's in coaching and mentoring, and for me, this is the point about the bridge out, really. And what's so interesting about coming to a master's so late in life and career, that. And I'm going to make some judgments now, but actually, if you go straight through, which was our model of doing things, A-level, university, start a job, and then get to a master's later, you've somehow got a chunk of experience that you bring, those inquiries, those questions, those interests, you bring to a master's context. To make sense of it. And that allowed me to have a play with some ideas that were buzzing around in my head. And a bit like Karen and I, we had all these ideas, we didn't really know what we're doing with them, did we, Karen?
No, not a clue.
And it just occurred to me, the logic in all this, because, let me rewind. We had people wanting to come and do maternity coaching for us as a business. And it was expensive, and the volume of women having babies outstripped any appetite and budget that the business would have had to support them. It just didn't make commercial sense. Not only that, we're asking people outside the business to support somebody inside the business with coming back to work. We'll come on to talk about dads, but I'm going to focus on mums now because this is about women and maternity. And it just followed to me that it was logical to say, do you know what? why don't we just start to connect some of these women up? And, if I'm a director, I'm going on maternity leave for the first time, that's a massive deal. I've spent a long time getting to where I am. I'm not about to pass it up lightly, but I've probably waited quite a long time to have a baby too. So, hell, how do I bring together these two competing priorities, allow me to be the director I want to be in this organisation, but I really want to be the parent I want to be. Okay, so how do you have the conversation with the line manager? This is the big, it's massively exposing to have to come back in, particularly the more senior you are. And remember, we're having babies later, so we're sort of early to mid-30s, which means we're probably, as women, more senior in our roles. How do you come back in and say to your boss, I know we had all these conversations before I went off, but guess what? Kind of things have changed a bit. I love my job, but guess what? I love being a parent too. And that's quite a risky conversation for careers. And for some people, it's about saying, actually, I need 6-12 months where I'm going to come back in, and I don't want any major projects. I need to come in and re-establish myself and then go again. And does the business have an appetite to have that conversation with me at the point at which I'm ready? Or essentially, do I get sidelined? And those aren't the conversations that people have. So who do you talk to about it?
No.
So really where I got to was the model of support for parents, as I said, we'll come to talk about dads, has to be to connect mums to be with working mums inside an organisation, and critically peer relationships. So if I'm a more junior colleague that I'm mentored by somebody who's more junior, it's not aiming to be more senior, more junior, which is the old sort of developmental mentoring relationships. This is about bringing parents together. And taking a very gender specific, and this is quite radical in this day and age, saying a mum has to mentor a mum, a dad has to mentor a dad, because their experience of parenting is uniquely appropriate to our gender and our context.
100%.
So I set up a mentoring program in Asda with 12 mentoring pairs, and we had some senior and in fact we had a whole range of people as mentors. And interestingly, with hindsight, actually what we needed was more of that kind of middle band, because that's where the bulk of pregnancies were occurring. But nevertheless, it was a great way to start it off. So that became the blueprint for a business. And so when I was starting my own business, one of my ex-bosses, Rebecca Fielding, said to me, "You can't ever use your name as the business. It wouldn't be like Powell Development, because I have an impossible surname. She said, nobody will ever find you." And actually, it was never about me. What I was keen to know was it was about mentoring parents. So the parent mentor became the thing, and the idea being conversations at the right time between parents to support and keep careers on track, careers and life, and whatever that means to people. That was the ambition.
So, what about Purple Shark then? Because there's a great story behind that, isn't there? That was
there's a story. Do you know what? I've left my big shark downstairs. I can't, but I've got plenty of sharks behind me. There we are. There's one. In fact, there's the one I did with you, Karen.
Yeah. As you do.
Well, yes. So the umbrella business is called Purple Shark Coaching and Development, and that came about because Karen and I have a lot of history with our children, and the name of my business came from being a parent. And so I guess the parent mentor is sort of one arm of Purple Shark. And so the story is this. I was at a local swimming pool in Buckinghamshire with my two daughters and my youngest daughter at the time. We went to the top of one of these water slides. You know how it is. People go there, don't they, on a Sunday morning? There's kids queuing up this kind of long set of steps to go down a water slide. And everyone's slightly cold because you've been down once and you're wet and you're waiting to go down. And Lydia got to the top of the slide and she couldn't go down. She was upset. What she basically saw was this huge gushing water slide with a purple slide with a shark's mouth around the outside of it, which of course she thought was going to clamp shut and completely demolish her. Oh, can't go down. So I just kind of dropped down, had a conversation with her, said, look, you're going to be fine. I wouldn't let you do anything that was, dangerous. It's going to be okay. Loads of people are going ahead of you. And so she, in the end...
And then shoved her.
Yeah, I got a little helping hand behind her back. Anyway, so down she went. And I could hear her wailing all the way down. Anyway, then she got to the bottom of the slide, stood up and went, "Oh, that was great. I'll do this again. I'll do it again." So basically, it became a bit of a thing in our family. We talked about purple shark moments. You know, that point where sometimes you know you've got to do something, but you really don't want to. And you're disproportionately fearful about doing it. And it's kind of where mentoring cuts in, really. There's somebody alongside you to say, "Look, you've got this, you can do this. I'm sure it's going to be fine. Let's talk about it." And, you know, ever since then, I brought into all sorts of contexts and development programs I've run, you know, even leadership programs with Morrison's, where I've had store managers come up to me months later to say, "Oh, I had a purple shark moment last week," and think, "Oh my God, it's stuck."
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So at some point, I've talked about, you know, making it to a bit of a sort of animating or something. In fact, I was talking to somebody this weekend. A colleague of mine was saying, "We'll just do it on AI. AI will generate it in about 10 seconds flat."
Yeah, it would. Yeah.
Yeah, would too. So earlier on, Nicki, you had mentioned about the patterns that you've seen, like that. You know, everyone thinks. I think you said something to the effect of that. Everyone goes, "Oh, well, that was their experience, but mine won't be like that." But there's patterns that have emerged. So, what are some of those patterns that you've seen?
Nice one. Okay. So there are a number of themes, and interestingly, I will just kind of do a bit of a kind of a drop shot at the moment. I wrote this book in 2017,
You did.
which was essentially an employer's guide to setting up mentoring programs inside organizations. So it's built, and there's a whole model in there around the maternity journey and what happens, and that sense of actually pre going on maternity leave, it's all about work, right? And a lot of the time people say, you know, the birth, I never got to that chapter. It's all about giving up work. I thought, work, I'll read that chapter when I've stopped work. And of course, a lot of people leave it as late as possible because I can't imagine a life without work, because that's what's defined us. When people say, "Who are you and what do you do?" most of us drop into work mode saying, "Well, this is a business I've got, I do this, do that." So, you know, when that's taken away, who are you and what are you? So a big theme is about that change in identity in terms of letting go of something that you've known for a very, very long time and embracing something you don't quite know what that is. I remember when Karen and I went on maternity leave, we were like, "Well, we're never going on coffee mornings, not going to do any of that stuff, you know, we're business people." And of course, we did, because actually what you find is when you go on maternity leave, and this is the surprise, work carries on without you, very dearly. When I've given a 3 terabyte handover and nobody's actually looked at it, they carry on without you. So it's a great leveler. And then you open this landscape up of really interesting people who don't do a job like you because you've been so completely immersed in it, because that's what we did in those days. And then you come out and think, "Oh, there's a life away from work and it's really interesting." And time has a whole different feel to it now. And, you know, hopefully if all goes well, you've got a happy, healthy baby that you're absolutely in love with, and you have time for friendships, and you have time for community and people in a way that you've never had before because you've always been too busy. So, you know, that's the surprise of maternity and sort of parental leave, I guess, really, that it opens up a whole stratosphere of interesting people, interesting things, interesting experiences. And, you know, you might have the guidebook, but the baby hasn't read the same book as you, so you're in learning mode. I guess what, the baby's rubbish generally.
Yeah.
So that there's a lot of themes of the whole disconnect from work, and then that point of somewhere on the horizon, the prospect of work appears again. And we've had lots of conversations where we do supervision with the mentoring programs that I run, where the mentors will say, "Oh, she's not been in touch. She's been quite a while. She's not been back in touch." And you have to be really careful about getting in touch with somebody who's on maternity leave, because the second you're in touch, it's not like you ring your mate up, say, "Should we have a cup of tea and a catch up?" It's work getting in touch, no matter who that person is, whether it's the line manager, the people team, or you as a mentor. Work just got in touch, and that just drops a whole new question onto the horizon, because work means you're going to have to think about coming back, and not everyone's ready to do that. And yeah, I have to say, we're very
Nick, have you have you done like mentoring with women that run their own business or smaller companies? Have you noticed anything different with that? Because the definition of work for women, I guess that's what Women of Our Time's about a bit, really. It's all different workplaces. So have you had any experience in those areas, or is it harder to get into that sort of thing?
I've chosen not to do it because my background is large corporates, and in no small part because a lot of women will want to sign up to be a mentor and be mentored privately. I'm really clear that a large organisation who has a whole bunch of women going on maternity leave has to view these people going on leave as returning talent. So therefore, why should the talent be investing in themselves? It should be the business saying, we really want her back up and running, faster, smoother, better, all that sort of stuff. And actually, therefore, it's our investment in terms of helping somebody to help her come back.
I agree.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, actually, because you wouldn't, like, it's half the workforce. Why would you not want to? And not that everyone has children, but like, why would you not want to do that?
Yeah, so I have really got examples of actually colleagues while I've been running my own business. As one of my ex-colleagues from Asda set her own business up. And actually, it's a whole different thing when it's your business and you take a maternity leave.
That's why I was asking, because I guess like the premise of women's support in the workplace, and it's a really good point you make about the only access people seem to have is to invest in it themselves, which is just ludicrous. I think the same about personal coaching. It astounds me. And I wonder whether it's something to think about, like, you know, like more and more women are disillusioned with the workplace and are setting their own businesses up.
So remember, what they say is it takes maternity leave to start a business.
To make you go, exactly. Or some sort of trauma.
Do you know what? What they want from me now isn't what I'm prepared to sacrifice. And, you know, the conversation around work-life balance of our generation meant people had to make some choices around to work the way I wanted to work isn't possible anymore. Unless I come back full-time, I have a nanny or whatever. You know, some of these things are not accessible to most people.
I mean, even nursery fees now, just for normal people, are extortionate.
I was talking about that with one of my friends yesterday, who, interestingly, is sort of the only point of reference I've got in terms of someone going back to work, which I'll come on to in a minute because I just found it really interesting. But the fees, it really is a wonder to me how people is it even financially viable for people to go back to work? Do you know what I mean? Like, because you are really essentially going to work for no pay.
Well, that's the dilemma, and this is why there are lots of campaigns. So Jolie Brearley's been campaigning for years through Pregnant and Screwed to really address the matter of childcare costs. And remember, it's a bit of a challenge, really. We want to pay the people who are looking after our children the best rate possible because we need them to do it. They're a parent by proxy.
Yeah.
And remember, you're giving over your most precious cargo. So we don't really want it too cheap. You have to be careful in all of that. So what do we want?
I remember when I went to George Clothing and they had they paid you got 50% off your nursery fees, and I never wanted my kids to go to a nursery, always wanted them to go to childcare, and I got succumbed by the fact it was 50% off. To your point, Elle, it was a big saving. Took her to the nursery where she went, and as soon as I went in, I thought, I do not want her here. And almost the next day, because he's walked early and they put her in the toddler group, and I went and I changed and went to a childminder, and it was my absolute overriding mission when I was there to get 50% off any type of childcare for any woman. And I just had the best finance director and Andy Bond, who was there, who supported it, because they got exactly what you said, Elle, and you said, Nicki, that it was a very heavily female environment and they were talent. And it was like one of my proudest moments, but one of my saddest, that you think people were having to choose that nursery because it was 50% off.
Yeah. And remember, I think also, awful. It's worth saying, we want people to have babies, have families. We're trying to build the workforce of the future. But, it's difficult and it's disruptive to business because people take maternity and then, but you want them to come back, and you want them to come back feeling good about being back in a way that actually means they can continue and bring that knowledge, that talent, that expertise back into the organisation. But interestingly, what I'm hearing now, so doing a piece of work, so Rachel, my eldest, is now a coach and working with early careers graduates. And I've just done a piece
She's on our podcast in a couple of
Oh,
weeks.
great. Okay. But the graduates of now are much more focused around mental health and well-being, work-life balance. They're not prepared to sacrifice what the likes of Karen and I did in the 80s, 90s in favour of a career. They're going, actually, I had one graduate left one employer and said, I don't see how me having a career here is commensurate with me being a parent in the future. So guess what? I'm going somewhere else right now before I have to get to that fork in the road. Now, that is an incredibly brave thing to say. Brave from the point of view of saying to an employer, your culture doesn't fit with what I want, but also the disclosure of the fact that she's even considering, thinking about having a family. Back in the day, you didn't really talk about it, did you, Karen? You left it as long as possible to say to people, "Oh, by the way, I'm pregnant."
Because you're off the list, weren't you?
By which time, everybody's guessed anyway. But and I say this a lot to people. I was working with some early careers graduates last week, and I was saying to them, "You are the future leaders of the business. So build the culture you want now. That's really important. 20, 30 years time, what's that culture got to look like? Because the old rules of presenteeism, of the hours working, I think are going to be changing, but I'm also not naive enough, can't even say it, to think that you can't, to be a senior leader in an organisation, you have to give something. Something has to give. So it's just not possible to say, I'll be a director of this business, I'll work 2 days a week, 1 day from home. Yeah, you can do that, but maybe you're not going to have that job. So you've got to exercise some choice there. But, so interestingly, so I wrote that in 2017 and then finally...
Oh, yeah, by the way, Nicki, what was the name of that book? Just in case people aren't watching and are only listening.
It's called Mentoring New Parents at Work. And
perfect. We'll stick it everywhere that it needs to be stuck in terms of links to it, but just in case people...
it's on Amazon, you can get it as an ebook. But in 2020, really as a follow-up to that, I was a fairly active member of the all-party parliamentary group for women and work, and a colleague and I on that group were getting fed up of the same stories coming out of the challenges people were finding combining career and parenting. So it's okay, right, we'll do a chunk of research. So in 2020, we did a chunk of research, which was basically to say...
Read that out. It's a short title,
I know. But the whole point of the research was to say, listen, employers, you think you've got amazing policies and processes and procedures. Nobody ever talks about those when they come back to work. What they say is, actually, I've got a line manager who's a complete nightmare. I wanted to work flexibly. I wasn't allowed to work flexibly. Or, my job was given away. All these things, are I guess, in many ways, operate counter to the spirit of the policy. So I did a chunk of research to say, okay, well, what's the reality? We're however many years on from Karen and I returning to work, which is 20 plus years. What's going on? And somebody said, it must have changed, must have got better. The reality is it hasn't. It's just as difficult.
No.
People want to be able to work flexibly. There's an expectation. I think 52% of people said actually they had difficulty coming back to work because they wanted to talk about flexible working. The boss wouldn't entertain the conversation.
I think as well that when you talk to organisations, their start point is to dismiss the flexible working. So they create a policy, but with an intent to not allow the flexible working. I think the policy is the tail that wags the dog.
Yeah, I think that could be true for some organisations, not others. And so 5 years on from this report, I've just finished a piece of research with a bunch of employers, many of whom are actively pro-flexible working and are expecting people to be pro-flexible working too. Or so their answer is yes, how, not yes, we've got a policy, but...
Do you think might be as a result of the pandemic? Do you think that might be as a result of the pandemic because everyone had to work in some capacity in a like, do you know, or not everyone, a lot of people had to work in a flexible capacity, and they've sort of seen that it can be done? Or do you not think that that's the case?
Yeah, you've got a much more hopeful view than you really, really believe them, Nicki.
I think COVID was the shake-up to all those line managers who said, you can't work from home because you can't deliver and do what we need you to do. So COVID disrupted disrupted the narrative. The challenge is now, actually, employers are stuck. There's a real kind of thirst to get people back into the office. And some employers have almost kind of reversed it again, say, that's it, we're done with flexible work, we expect you to be back. And remember, the political climate is changing. So conversations around ED&I, flexible working, the whole idea of inclusion, I don't agree with them. You can hear how things are going at the moment in terms of, we all need to be in the office. Do we really though?
There's some actually terrifying conversations being happening with some of the one particular political party in this country, even today, about diversity and inclusion and all the abortion things, which is just terrifying because it's been said out loud for the first time. Probably since me and you were in work. It is pretty terrifying. I think that's why we have to have a voice. We have to amplify the voices of women to sort of combat it. It's quite scary.
I mean, I guess this kind of links nicely into the mentoring piece and which is why it's so important to connect women with other women inside the organisation. We are talking about big organisations here. That actually, if you've got somebody on the inside when you're on the outside, feeling lost, overwhelmed, vulnerable, unsure, need to have a big conversation, don't know who you're going to prep it with. It's massive. That confidential space is everything to her. And then equally, what you get then is you get a group of mentors internally across different levels, very senior through to some middle level mentors, but they become your bank for the organisation to say, what are we hearing? What are we noticing? What are some of the themes? So there is a way to tap into what's going on for your returning talent. Without breaking confidences, but to get a sense of, okay, what are people talking about? What are we struggling with? What are we not doing? Equally, advocacy for a program is critical. One of the things I always talk to my employers about is, who will be advocating for your program? And it's got to be beyond the HR team. Typically, we want somebody who's a parent. It doesn't matter what gender that parent is, but actually who will promote it, talk about it, share some of the things that are going on, and be a caller to arms, really. And then equally, we've not talked about it. We have to start talking about dads. Because it's the only thing we do is talk about mums and women. It makes maternity and parental leave a women's issue. Now, the reality is, hey, at the moment, we are the ones producing babies, physically producing babies. But actually, more and more dads, the millennial father wants to be actively involved in parenting. They don't want to be back in our era where, my husband, carried on working full-time, I work part-time, to do the whole, 50% work, everything else at home, so he could carry on. People don't want it in the same way now. So there's a whole conversation around what does working parenting look like for both parties in this. And actually, we're in danger if we homogenize of making everybody's journey invisible. So we talk about mentoring new parents at work. The reality is the dad journey is very, very different to the maternity journey. And we have to allow men to have their voice to talk about the things that they find difficult, the things they find amazing. Their language is different, their pain points are different. And for the first time, in a lot of contexts, a dad, in many respects, is invisible through this process, through the becoming a parent. Because everything revolves around the mum. How is she, or breastfeeding, having a baby, or whatever. So he's there to be able to inform and consult, advise, and what have you. But actually, it's actually all about her. How does he find that niche? What does that look like for him? And for a lot of men, and we find this in mentoring relationships, they find it quite hard to come to mentoring because mentoring suggests you need fixing or there's a problem, there's something to solve. Hey, I don't identify with that. A lot of mums don't. How do we get people to recognise the value of having somebody to talk to? So, there's a big job to do in terms of internal comms to normalise that, to make that part of what we do. For everyone to say, hey, I'm a parent, here's what I know, and bloody hell, I didn't know that before I started, but, I would advocate for you getting a mentor, and it's part of what we do. And you're being mentored not because you're broken and you need fixing, but we reckon we're looking after you, we're looking after the business better, where we give you a mentor. We'll allocate your mentor rather than, would you like a mentor? That's a binary choice. Most people would say, nah, it's all right, I'm fine.
And because you might not know what mentoring looks like. You might never have heard of it before, and you are right. And I think this is my opinion. There's no actual facts behind it, but I'd imagine a bloke as well, like you say, would go, no, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm totally okay. Don't need to speak about anything. Please don't make me speak to anyone, more so than a woman who might be going, actually, I could just do with speaking to anyone about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in a very early program, one employer, in an effort, this is a really interesting part of my journey, because I haven't got it right the whole time. I've been experimenting as I go. I matched a mum-to-be returner with a working dad in the workplace. So we did the mentor training, we did the mentee training. At the end of the session, she came to went, I can't work with a bloke. She said, I've got to work with another woman, got to work with another mum. And I went, okay, right, that's absolutely fine. If it matters to you, it matters to us. And it was a reminder to me, that journey where you go on to becoming a mother and all the psychological and physiological changes you go through, you don't want to talk to a bloke about that if that's the bit you want to bring to mentoring.
Yeah.
And you don't know what you're going to bring until you get there. And equally, if you're trying to get, I don't know, a new dad mentored by an experienced mum, you're kind of replicating potentially the partnership relationship. And what are we mentoring here? So you have to be really clear, what is the question you're trying to answer in order to set the whole mentoring up for success. And inclusion is not about homogenizing. I'm really clear on that now. Mums mentor mums, dads mentor dads. An adoptive mum needs to work with an adoptive mum-to-be. Same for dads. So it's tailoring that context. And that's not to say it's going to be, have I had any that haven't worked out? No, actually, we haven't. But, you want to start off with the spirit of, there's a level of experience that we're bringing to this relationship that is the thing that connects us. So that makes this relationship work. And, a lot of people find, because they work really closely, they get to the end of relationships like, oh, well, we could carry on because actually the baby's now about to start school, or maybe we've got high school coming up, then where they're going to university. Whoa. So what is it? The mentor literally could go on forever. But, the mentor has her own journey or his own journey to keep. So actually what we say is, for a lot of the programs that I run, this is return to work mentoring. How do we end well? But equally, part of that ending is to celebrate the journey and what we've done together and what have you. But also to say, right, how are you going to resource yourself for the next bit? What do you want? What are the questions you've got now? Because it's not going to be me. You're back. We're up and running. 6, 8, 12 months in. Okay, now it's time to move on and do something else. So again, it's being very clear around the boundaries and what it does or doesn't do, because it could just go on forever. And it's a hard thing. It's a really hard thing to end a mentoring relationship. And what you don't want is to fizzle, because that's somehow a bit dissatisfying, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you working on at the minute then, Nick? What's new for 2025 and beyond?
Good question. So I'm working on, I'm finishing my chunk of research now. So that's the employer report that is being pulled together as we speak. So the 2020 research was the employee voice of, you've got all these policies, here's how we're really finding it. This research is actually saying, okay, we're asking employers now, here's what we know to be the case in terms of people's returning experiences. What do you know and how are you legislating for it? And what have you got in place? And it's whether it's coaching, mentoring, there's been a real rise in employee resource groups and informal buddying systems going on. So it's not that I'm necessarily going to employers saying you've got to have coaching, you've got to have mentoring. It's really saying, the point you made earlier, how are we amplifying that voice and allowing people to talk about their experience and bring it to the workplace that allows them to feel part of something, not something that has to be shut out and excluded. I've gone back to work. I can't talk about the fact I'm a parent or challenges I've got. So
Yeah.
And what are you going to use that for then? What's that actually going to do, do you think? How are you going to use the research to like carry on making the difference that you make?
I think it's really, it's a reminder to employers there's a whole range of things you can do to keep your returning talent on track. Remember, this is all about keeping careers and people inside an organisation getting the best from it. So the investment is there. And I think it's about saying to employers, there's lots of ways you can cut this. And remember that the environment that the HR functions are working at the moment, and ED&I, it's a busy, noisy one. And, a couple of them have said to me, in all honesty, parents, we kind of did that a couple of years ago. We're not really, we're interested in the trans agenda now. We're interested in LGBTQ plus. So we're kind of, the parents group are doing their own thing now. All right, okay. And it's not to say that I would never say anything's right or wrong, but there's only so much bandwidth to do things. Yeah. So my call will be focus on whatever you want, but what else have you got where you can add value that doesn't need to take a whole load of time and resource, but will still make a difference? Because that person who's coming back from maternity or from paternity leave next week is in an interesting place. Engage in a conversation about that with them. Somebody somewhere. You'll be doing yourself a favour.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I think it's particularly when I'm going to use the word agenda because I can't think of any other word to do it, but when that is what is on the agenda at the moment, and it just makes me sort of think, well, that's why you can't do it like that. It's got to be like, you've got to have it intrinsically within your work culture, because otherwise then it's just, oh, we're not doing parents anymore. We're doing what's next here. And, you've put all that time and effort in place to set something up. Yeah. What's the point in doing that if you're not going to keep nurturing it, keep it going, keep it so that it's useful? What's the point in doing it?
We get a lot of employers who set up mentoring programs, and then ultimately the parent mentoring becomes absorbed into their broader mentoring portfolio. And for them that works. It's just part of what they offer. So culturally, this is the norm. This is part of what we do. And I don't really have stats on the take up of that versus when we run it as a pure standalone program. And I think also things like ERGs have a lifespan, so the employee resource group. So, if I'm a working parent and I've been back, I don't know, a couple of years, I might be very passionate about doing this now. So I step into that space and I'm trying to do stuff now. And in 2-3 years' time, when it's less important and maybe I've got a bigger, different job, I'm going to step away from it. So it needs that refreshing.
I agree with you. Yeah, one of the things that you said there really resonates with me, because you see even in coaching, you see a repeat pattern of new moms going back into an organisation to do like a pack for maternity returners, or you see like all new moms in that enthusiastic mode, which is the real thing about women, all women and men, which is I want to help somebody have a better experience or as good as an experience. And like you see, you're coaching somebody and it's like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do like a pack and I'm going to do, like you have this like you said, Elle, this Groundhog Day where you think, oh my God, how many new moms have they had? And each new mom is trying to do something and nobody's listening to them. They're like shouting into the wind. Because somehow or other, I think you're so right, Elle, at the root of it, the value of that returning parent is not seen. And it's really interesting, but it's also quite sad.
Well, it's one of the phrases that I've used a lot over the years is saying, these people were the future talent once. They were the graduates, they were the high potentials. So all that's happened is that career has met parenting, and you've stopped investing because. And it's it's not just in the parenting domain. You see that with graduate programs, that we.
It's in the lot.
So we invest in people, we give them all this development, and then somehow the development stops. What we haven't done is built in that sense of how do you take accountability and responsibility for your own development, your own sense of welfare and well-being in a way that allows you to continue to grow, not wait to be given a piece of development or whatever. So there's a cultural context of do we make mentoring part and parcel of what we do across lots of arenas, which also includes parenting, by the way, and we're proud to talk about that because there's many of us in it. Whatever percentage of the population are working parents anyway. Let's talk about that. But also, and Karen, you talked about that earlier in terms of me doing the masters. I think when I started in the masters, because it was part resourced by me, part resourced by my employer, I had a completely different working relationship with that as a learning program because it was me investing in me.
Yeah.
And I don't know
Yeah.
how in a large corporate you get that sense of personal ownership in quite the same way. That to me made such a difference because I knew what I was doing was,
100%.
I was determined it's going to make a difference. I was going to do something with it.
No, you're 100% like that sense of like, I'm going to use the word entitlement, but it's like I'm in this organization. I'm entitled to that development. I'm entitled to be on a leadership program. I'm entitled. Means that a lot of people are sitting back and not taking responsibility, and they're waiting to be given something instead of like perhaps living in the reality of it's never going to happen. I was doing something with somebody earlier, and I said the same thing. I went, just step into the space. Stop waiting for permission. Just step into the space. But I think it's a really interesting mindset, and that is about the relationship employees have with their employers.
I agree.
I think it's about, do they feel like they belong? Do they feel like they matter? Like the mattering bit is huge, isn't it? I'm going to ask you something totally different, so I don't forget. And I've been trying to ask you, and I don't know whether you know. Do you know what because I'm a governor at a school. We know that there's a real reduction in children being born, and so they're having to reduce some of the places in primary schools. There's a big flux at the minute, so there's not enough senior schools, but there's a real reduction in babies being born. Is that something on the agenda of employers? Because it is a truth, isn't it? It is a fact that there's less children being born. Is that something on anybody's radar?
It's not something I've heard at all in any of the conversations. No.
Right, interesting. I just need Tasha. I know it's nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I thought, you might know, because it is a risk.
No. Do you know what? I think that's really interesting, actually, because you hear an awful lot about that being the case. We're not having enough. Not necessarily I have never heard it from anyone in a position of power in this country. Let's put it that way. But you hear it a lot that no, we're not going to have a workforce. We're not going to do this, blah, blah, blah. And it's really interesting. I know, you're only one person and that's not like, but the fact that you have never heard that being brought up as an issue, you have nobody in the actual employer environment, nobody in the companies is actually having that conversation.
But I think, sorry, I could cross you there. I think it's worth knowing, though, people becoming parents is a disruptor to employers. So the fact that birth rate may be dropping, actually, that's pretty good.
Well, that's why I was asking, in any way, shape or form, are they? It doesn't matter if they're not, but it's only because I know it's so current with us about school places and about, and I was thinking, when you were talking about it, where I was coming from was, would that be something that created more of a need to look after your returning parents? Is where I was coming from. Do you know what I mean? Like, no, you didn't know what I meant, but that's what I meant.
But I think so. That leads. But the touch point's an important one there. That actually, what employers need to know is, what are the differentiators? So I was speaking to one HR director who said to me, she said, look, frankly, we don't invest in coaching and mentoring. We probably should. But, she said, our culture wins out. She said, we offer great flexibility. We work really hard to make sure that actually we support people coming back through different working hours, ability to work from home. And we've got a great working culture. So employers need to have something that differentiates them in a marketplace where there will be less talent coming in. They've got to look after their people. So you're making an interesting point there.
Yeah, that's.
And remember.
Yeah, no, that's what I was just thinking. Yeah, I was thinking about when you're convincing people about what's your why. All of us work in an arena, particularly with women. But also in lots of things that we work with, where you're having to work with CEOs to try and find what their why is. And a lot of the time it doesn't work. But this is like a real thing, which is, do you know what?
Yeah.
The talent pool's going to get less.
The talent pool will get less, so you've got to look after people. So there's a reason to continue invest, and not only that. I mean, so the challenge will be getting them in the first place, but then actually then when career meets parenting, which has always been the case, is actually how do we support people at that point? And of course, the fact is the trend for having babies is still leaving it to later. And I don't remember, do you remember, Karen, about 5-6 years ago, an article came in the press talking about the fact that some employers are offering support to women who want to freeze their eggs in order to be able to have babies later. I remember thinking, that's like, oh my God, this is a whole conspiracy of, we'll support you. By the way, freeze your eggs so we can have you to work a little bit longer. On the basis that when you defrost them, you can have a baby. Hello.
Oh my God.
At a time when we decree that it's right.
When she
Handmaid's Tale, isn't it?
Yeah, we're granting your maternity leave next year if you'd like to take it.
There should be a film about this.
We're colluding with the belief that we'll have babies when it's convenient to us, not when. And biology is not interested in scheduling and convenience.
Yeah.
And the later we leave it, the harder it is. We're in big jobs, they're stressy jobs. Okay, that doesn't really generate best time to start having babies, and then people, it's a challenging time. It really is a challenging time.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can't take that on, Nick. So what are you going to take on? What's in your little circle of control to try and make a difference here? Because I'd love to see you sorting that out.
Oh, no, that's a comment.
So what do you want, if you look back this time next year, what do you want to have made a difference with? Because you always make a difference. So it's pretty amazing. But what do you want to have
I think the thing that keeps me going with all of this is knowing that the principle of what I'm doing is absolutely right. Is connecting women, and with the volume is around maternity. Let's be honest here. It's collecting women with women for supportive, enabling conversations, sharing experience, validating experience, one conversation at a time. Okay, I'm not about to try and start a revolution. Okay, this is just me. I'm really passionate about it. But I know every time I sit down and have a conversation, I do a chunk of supervision with employers. The stories they bring, the examples they bring are just amazing. So for me, I'm not about big, audacious goals. I'm just talking about one conversation at a time. The girl who's come back next week, who's going to connect up with her, support her, have a conversation because she's going to need some help. Or maybe the girl who came back 6 months ago, who nobody's actually said, how you doing? What's happening? Yeah,
how you doing?
What do you want now? What you said you wanted before, is that still the same? It's okay to say if you're not. So I think, that's for me. And, I think also that more employers are looking, so I'm going to publish the research in another next couple of months, that more employers are looking at the list of possibilities and saying, okay, right, we haven't got a huge amount of bandwidth, but we know we can do that. Or there are some elements, and this is sharing best practice. They can say, right, it's the shop window of what's possible. Yeah, we'll do a bit of this, we'll do a bit of that. Okay, that's going to start to make a difference.
Awesome. Ellie, not to interrupt, but did you want to ask Nicki something about you said one of your friends was going through it, and you said, I'll come on to that later, and we haven't really got there.
I think it was boring, and I think it was just me telling a story because it was relevant to what we were talking about at the moment, and I didn't have a question. I think it was just an anecdote, really. So it won't bore everyone. I know, I can't... if she listens to this now, she's going to be like, boring. Was my story boring to you? No.
Edit that bit out.
It was just interesting because she's always she's always been quite driven. She's not wanted to run the world, do you know what I mean? But she's always wanted to do really well in her job. She's always wanted to sort of take the next step. And she's still really driven now, but she's gone, since she's gone back to work. Well, first off, I can imagine, I don't have any kids, but I can imagine everyone is she really didn't want to go back to work at first, then got to the point where she was almost desperate to go back to work because she was like, I can't sit in the house and do this any longer. And then went back and sort of, there still is that drive in her, but I think the biggest difference I've noticed with her is that she would answer her phone at any moment of the day. Do you know what I mean? Anything that happened, straight on it. No, I'll pick up. No, it's fine. No, everyone would call if you had anything wrong. I mean, we'd be camping in the middle of nowhere with no signal. She'd still be, oh no, it's someone from work. And the biggest difference I've seen in her now is, honestly, she couldn't give a shit what happens in that environment outside of when she is in that environment. And
That's
that was really, there wasn't much of a point to it, or I just thought it was really interesting that she still wants to get on, she still wants to really do well, but at the same time she almost doesn't care if that isn't the case, because her priorities have shifted. And I know I'm really going on now, but I think it goes back to what you're saying. Like, you think, you say like, oh, I'm going to go back to work and I'm going to do this, but you don't know until you've had a kid. You haven't got a clue what you want.
No, it's true, but that's the hardest thing, and there's no shame in that. Actually, saying, actually, I've learned by experience. Actually, what I thought I knew absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And I think, the whole concept of ambition and doing really well is not to be underplayed. And actually, well, what does doing well really mean? Actually, she might be doing really well now, but she just reevaluated life.
Yeah.
She's reevaluated what matters, and actually, what are we doing it all for? So actually, what she's done is she's regained a bit of perspective, and that way she maybe was doing things before may not have been the most helpful way anyway. And actually, if you overlay parenting on top of that, it's just like, you're trying to put the kids' fish fingers on the plate and, taking a phone call from work. Do you know, I'm not about that life. That's actually, all I'm doing is selling crisps. That can wait. Doink. It's not that important.
Exactly.
And we are, remember, we're our worst enemy. And Karen and I have talked about this a lot. I gave away as a young professional so much discretionary time. The time I respected the hours I did what I did was when I had boundaries and I had to I had to do drop off and come in and get home in time to do pick up. God, I became productive. Well, that wasted time.
Yeah.
So this is what I mean. It's not doing well is a matter of perspective. Okay, and people still should have and do have ambition and want to do really well. But what really well has done is it's just reevaluated.
Looks like, yeah. No, that's a great point.
Well, that's amazing, and we could talk forever on this, couldn't we? So you need to come back and we'll talk about something else.
Yeah. No, that really has. That's been fascinating, Nicki. Thank you. So the last question that we have for you is, if you had to choose a song that was like the theme song for your life, whether that be in general or just at the moment, what would it be?
Well, so see if you gave me 30 seconds to think about this when we started the call.
Don't exaggerate.
Sorry, 40.
I'd say it's a whole minute and a half.
Do you know what? The constant theme of my life, and Karen will attest to this, is when I became a parent, right? All I needed was a set of running trainers because I was always late. Okay? I was running into work, I was running out of work, I was always just about in time. So I'm going to offer a theme that is the complete opposite of that. That actually what I want to say is that space to think, to reflect, just to think about what's possible and what's in my gift is the most important thing. So acknowledge where you are is fine, but actually it's a bit of music that just makes you think about possibilities and opening up ideas. And it is, saying that, Golden Hour, Chilled Pig.
It is, I'm that chilled, I can't remember what it is.
Oh no, that was brilliant. Thank you so much, Nicki, and thank you to everyone for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
See you later. Bye.